Today is day 5 of the July 93 7-day retreat at Springwater. Someone referring to the talk yesterday in which something like this was said: unless or if there cannot be at least an instant of unconditioned perception, which can also be called insight or seeing or open listening, awareness, unless that can happen in a human being, or does happen, we're doomed, or forever trapped in repetitive, habitual cycles. And someone asked, who is it that gets trapped, or who is it that gets doomed? This question or similar ones have popped up all through the retreat, particularly in group meetings. Somebody saying, I want to do away with this self. It's nothing but a bother, a trap, a burden, a pain. And someone will say, well, who is the doer? Who is getting rid of it? Who doesn't want or who wants? Who is watching? Who is the observer? I've gotten away from asking the question in this very traditional way of who, because it's so trappy in itself. I think I said that yesterday. Because the brain is habituated to answering certain questions in certain ways. If there's asking for who, there must be somebody. Me, of course, in this case. Me, I'm hearing, I'm getting trapped. I and my fellow human beings would get doomed. Because that's the very superficial answer. Someone will ask back, well, what is this I? What is this wanting? What is fearing or angering? That's a little bit a better way of putting it. It doesn't already posit someone who's doing this to himself, herself. Although this is what was mentioned too in a group meeting. Someone saying, you're doing this to yourself. No one is doing to you. You're doing it to yourself. Which reinforces our dualistic assumptions and perceptions about ourselves, that there's a doer and someone, me, to whom I am doing something. We've never, in one talk, gone into this whole question, what is this me? What is this feeling of I-ness, me-ness, selfness? Separation that is so alive and active in us human beings. Is that something we could do today? Because the other question that comes up all the time is, well, what is insight? Could we go into that? What is awareness? Unconditional or unconditioned perception. But talking about the seemingly two topics are not, it's not two, it's one topic. Because in order to intelligently inquire and express what is seen, it needs seeing, it needs insight, it needs looking, which often happens in the wake or in the midst of inquiry or wondering or not knowing. In other words, our foundations of basic assumptions having been shaken, cracked, not unconditionally believing in the existence of a separate I or me, may have already happened due to an insight into imagery, pleasurable or painful imagery, seen as imagery about me, seen as image. People come upon this and are astonished. There's usually astonishment. And when a thought is really seen, one person mentioned yesterday is almost ecstatic. I saw thinking, or thinking became transparent. And with thinking becoming transparent, it's also transparent what awareness is, because awareness is not thinking. But it makes thinking transparently visible, palpable, hearable. The senses are not separate either. That's another assumption. Hearing is separate from seeing, is separate from feeling, is separate from the five senses, separate. The Buddhists add, maybe other Eastern religions, a sixth sense which is thinking. And that too is not separate from the senses. So interwoven, one thought and the whole body is sensing something and emoting about something. And that sensing is so real, so palpable, that reality is given to the thought that has produced it or that emerges from it about a me, a real me, which is being hurt or angry or desirous of someone. The fact that thought, imagery, assumptions, on whatever level, superficial or very deeply hidden levels, has this intricate and instant or almost instant relationship with this physical organism, which orchestrates the thoughts and images with its glandular and organismic and muscular states and tensions, lends reality to the imagery of me, my fear, my pain, my anger, because it's so palpable, so real, through the organism manifesting whatever the thought or memory elicits in this organism. And an organism manifesting fear symptoms or anger symptoms has a way of signaling to the brain that there's something to be afraid of or something to be angry about. Because very often the triggering thought was not seen, was not transparent, but the fear in the belly and in the heart palpitating, sweat pouring, wanting to eliminate. Those symptoms are states of body indicate to the brain something must be dangerous around here or inside. If the original thought is still there, that gives reinforcement to it. If it's not there, the brain will readily scan for something to be afraid of and find something. There's always something to be afraid of. Inwardly, in memory, maybe outwardly if one lives in a dangerous situation. dangerous neighborhood, or whatever. So what is this me, this self, this I, this feeling of separation? A separately, an observer who feels separate from the sounds, the sights, or a wanter who feels separate from the imagined desirous object or person of his or her wants. That's what one person brought up repeatedly. You talk about looking at a tree, and it's relatively easy to listen to the sound of leaves rustling, birds singing. But what about desire, sexual desire, or desire for food? Well, we've talked about desire for enlightenment, and it's not so different. Just different things get triggered and stimulated in the body with each object of desire. I'm including another person as an object. I'm not meaning to put people down. But the object of desire may create different symptoms in the body or different states. Desiring a lover or imagining a lover, oneself with him or her, triggers different glands and organs in this body, and therefore feels different from imagining a pursuer, somebody after me, who's got something against me, wants to do me harm. Different symptoms, different body state evoked. Fearing and desiring itself are not so different processes. It is always based on someone separate, imagining something to be run away from or to be run toward. And that imagined a scenario of either loving, being in love with someone, making love, eating wondrously good food, or being pursued by an attacker. All of this imagery, oneself involved in it, activates the body as though a real situation existed, a real mating taking place, or a real persecution visibly there. Somebody about to throw a rock at me. I can imagine it and feel just as paralyzed or whatever the body all triggers, to run, to freeze, or to attack. And imagining a state of bliss or enlightenment and wanting that again. Maybe one has gone, many people have reported having gone through opening, blissful, non-separated states. Something hangs in the memory. The brain has made it into a story, an added chapter of the story of my life, and can dwell on that chapter, on that last retreat, imagine it, what did I do, and try to get that. Maybe repeating what one thinks, one remembers one did to bring this about. Sit still for hours, or walk around, while eating, while watching a bird, and try to repeat that. This is what the brain does, unbeknownst to itself. Project remembrances and then stimulate the organism to get it or to run away from it. As though the real situation was happening. And all that's happening is somebody sitting quietly on a cushion. awareness dawn in the midst of the rush of desire or the rush of fear or anger. Usually the general agreement is in the rush of it, the Niagara of it, very little chance for waking up. The space is too tight, too filled up. The emotions too deeply heaving and filling out the space. But I would not assume anything anytime, although we're full of assumptions that we're not aware of. But once becoming aware of an assumption, I assume it can't happen in the midst of anger, in the midst of imagining food and the mouth is already salivating, one can't hardly swallow it all. Why not? Why shouldn't it be possible to wake up at that moment, to become aware of being engaged in a fantasy and feeling the body orchestrating the fantasy as though something real was going on? Because something real is going on, which is the reality of a video, or as somebody called it, a display in the mind, in the brain. Oh, may not just sit in the brain, it sits all over this body, verbally, visually, and non-visual, and non-verbal. So let's go back to our first question, because it's maybe the most frequently touched throughout this retreat. What is this me? What is this I, this self? That so much is said and written about, what to do with it, what not to do with it. What it does, what it shouldn't do, that self should be replaced by no self, and then I to be fine. Can there be a realization that in order to express what this is, there has to be some getting in touch with it? Because we can forever go by what other authors and great seers and thinkers and religious leaders have said. Very powerful to believe in it. Powerful habit in human beings to take over what others have said. And if one can clearly reproduce the words of someone else, it can so easily masquerade for a clear understanding. I remember when I read Alan Watts over 20 years ago, 30 years ago. He's a very clear writer. And the clarity of his descriptions made me think that I understood all of that I had seen it. Because I could also talk about it clearly, mostly in his words. It was when coming upon a few writings in an anthology. Kyle brought it home from school, from the audio-visual department of a elementary school, some anthology on something or other. In there was an article by D.T. Suzuki and one by, what's the Canadian man who said the medium is the massage or message? Marshall McLuhan, yes. And those two articles touched me deeply, and particularly D.T. Suzuki's. Because where was he coming from that he said things that he did say which were not clear to the intellect? There was a real fascination with that, and not just fascination, because he was quoting in his particularly elegant style sayings of Zen masters or responses, little dialogues, and in his own commentary. And something was intriguing about where was he coming from to speak like that. Also very early reading in two books, one was an Alan Watts book, one was a Lama Govinda book, two quotes by Krishnamurti. At that time I hadn't read one book by him, had never heard this name, but because the quote was so pregnant, something reverberated, and yet it was not comprehensible in a resolving intellectual way, no resolution to what was said. The name was remembered, a little parenthetical or asterisked reference to a book by Krishnamurti. So something was set in motion about wondering about, maybe I'm putting it in today's words, a looking or listening space or expressing space, which I did not know. It was not familiar to me. But that's where these words must have come from. I'm putting it in today's words. At that time I didn't know how to put it, but except, what are they saying? How could somebody say that? And so often when I say something, people fight me. Or feel I'm making assertions that I shouldn't be making. Not everybody, but sometimes it happens, which adds spice to the day. I don't mind it, please. I'm not trying to shelter myself. I really like being challenged. It's very good for all of us to challenge each other and not just get hurt and defensive and walk away or carry grudges and stuff. That's not helpful for revealing something about oneself. So, if something is not comprehensible, as it was not comprehensible to me years and years ago, still the brain did not eliminate it or fight it, argue with it. It carried it around as a non-understood puzzle or question mark. And this carrying around that the much maligned brain does, sometimes does some helpful things, does a lot of helpful things. But this carrying around, keeping it in suspense somewhere of something not understood, and yet somewhere reverberating, as though something true was touched, one doesn't quite know, can be very helpful. For our looking and listening. Maybe in the presence of such a question carried around, something may be discovered what otherwise would have never been noticed. All of a sudden there's a congruence. Yes, this is how it is. This is what the saying means. So, coming back, this is how I started on this path. Reading, if it is just regurgitating or repeating, is not of much help to illuminate what's going on in ourselves. But reading something and not comprehending it and not throwing it out, maybe if one can be lucky to look up the author and meet with him or her and ask or challenge or whatever. But if that's not possible, some of these authors are dead. wondering what is meant by that. But we can't get around looking directly here or to depersonalize it, which is not easy to keep a depersonalized language with a habit pressing to personalize it in our language. Wondering, realizing directly on this spot, at this time and space, what's going on in this body-mind. Then there is first-hand understanding. Somebody yesterday in a meeting said, I'm sick and tired of second-hand stuff. So what's the first-hand stuff? Reading is relatively easy, doesn't take too much energy. Of course, one can't be falling asleep. Although we do that too and read over the lines and at the end of the page wonder, what did I read? The brain can still sort of simulate getting the words but no meanings behind them. That part is already asleep. Or can one read a book in which there's a felt sense that the author is coming from looking, writing out of seeing, and test out whether one can see this for oneself. So if there's something written about the self or the me being image or clusters of image, memory, projections of myself into the future, and we've also said this, one doesn't have to just read it, it's being said in talks. Can one not just repeat this and absorb it and say, yes, this must be so, this person has had experience, some accreditation, so I can have faith in her or him. But is there a gnawing need to find out for oneself what is really the truth, what is really going on? First hand, first sight, first ear. So how can I prove or find out whether it's true or not that the me is bundles of images? Well, we have to start it simple. I can't give a complicated talk and then people also can't follow it easily. Start with images as more than images. Images based on past experiences, what one has been told one is, what one has read one could be and would like to be, what one has been told or read that one should not be. Being stupid, being intelligent, being good or bad, being worthy or unworthy, being important or not being of any importance, not as important as the older brother or the father or whoever one is being compared with. All these impressions so early, happening to a most impressionable, open, innocent brain, and sticking there. Imagery about what I am, or ideas. Some people tell me, I have no images. Sometimes later they say, oh, I found one, I do have them. But some people say, I'm more verbal, I'm not so visual, but I have plenty of ideas about myself. How can we come upon that? Or how can it dawn that this is so? come into view, be realized, be seen. Very often, it becomes most palpable in a reactive situation, in relationship. Somebody says nice things about me and something builds up. The image is being flattered. I feel good about myself, which can be followed. It is a physical process of thinking, picturing, imaging oneself in favorable ways, which triggers glands and organs to send out pleasant feeling chemicals, or the chemicals trigger organs or muscles which are felt to be pleasurable. One feels good, one feels energized, one wants to hear more, wants to be around that person some more. You can come to my house anytime. I want to talk with you again, but what it means, I want to hear from you how good I am, how important I am, and so forth. Will one become aware of this, or will there be awareness of this? When the chemicals are pouring, the energy is rising, the feeling is great. Will one wonder what's going on? Or will one believe as one has believed in this me? Being just some more attached to the whole structure. A little bit different when the opposite happens. Somebody puts me down, compares me unfavorably, insults me, criticizes me, attacks me, all the things. Look for oneself. Then anger or hurt. Can that be felt? As quickly as it's happening, as instantly? It takes a lot of awareness, a lot of energy to be right there, seeing the connection between the idea, the words that are spoken, the idea that's heard about myself, and the body reacting. If that's seen, we talked about it once, the connection may not even take place, and that's possible when there's already attention, awareness, presence. Sometimes you feel as though somebody could say anything to you, and it would not result in a connection. And one can feel potential connection. There's always lurking, ready to be made, but it doesn't take place. There's attention right then and there. And maybe with this kind of energy, which is a circuit breaker, or a preventer of a circuit to come into being, maybe the connection, if it happens again and again, atrophies, does not maintain itself. Whereas every time it happens, it's strengthened a bit more. So physiologists and neurologists tell us. They also tell us we don't know everything about it yet, not completely. So at that moment of feeling hurt, all the consequences of feeling hurt, either withdrawing or already, the brain already fictionalizing a revenge. I'm going to do to him or her when I have a chance. Or taking it out on someone else. Putting someone else down who's weaker than oneself. Letting out one's hurt and anger on others. Because it's not possible to get at the one We're hurt when one is too afraid of that person. It's an authority figure. In these situations in which we are so much of the time, it comes up in every retreat, in every meeting almost. Anger, fear, hurt, desire. What is it? What is it that's going on? Because the brain by itself, without the energy of awareness or insight, will not tell us what's going on truthfully. Its fiction appears as real. Its assumptions of a separate me, the images being the manifestation of it, are taken to be real. The identification that has happened of image with body, my body, there's a body, but the identification with it, incorporated into this image of oneself as something to be protected, defended, aggrandized, promoted, or put down. It's not seen for being fiction. It's experienced as real. The brain has no feedback that says, wait a minute, don't take my structures or my stories for real. They're just stories made up of memories and impressions. So it takes this strange phenomenon of awareness or insight to expose what's going on. That indeed an image has been hurt, and what hurts is the body that connects to the thought through various pathways, electrochemical, neurochemical, whatever. The attachment to the story of oneself is at times very obvious. If there's just some interest to watch it, become intimate with it. First of all, to doubt that it represents reality. Follow one's imagination with some awareness of what one can become, what one will be, or what one is becoming almost every moment. Every moment, thought makes something of this moment, puts the me in relationship to it. I'm doing better, I'm not doing so well. I can see now. Now I'm a seer. Now I'm enlightened. I'm no good, I'm a hopeless case. Others can do it better. Oh, now I have a method. Finally, I got a handle on it. Little comments. One person said, just little, as though seen out of the side of one's eye. Little, very fine, subtle comments. Almost too hard to hear. He said, it's a whispering. But it affirms me as being, as existing, as progressing, doing all right, or the opposite. So the question, who is aware? I don't even want to go into that, because there's no who, there's only awareness or no awareness. Awareness sheds light on feeling like a who, like a somebody. The addiction to it either when it goes well, also the addiction to it when one is miserable. That's the amazing phenomenon. That we human beings can be just as addicted to being a miserable person as to being a successful, progressing, growing person, doing well, being VIP. Why? It's amazing, isn't it? Why is this so? Well, why do we get addicted? Because it's habit. Habit. Maybe you find some different explanation. I don't want to calm over the question with explanations, but habit is strong and feels secure to a certain degree. To do what one has always done, to think what one has always thought, to think like others think, gives a sense of security, which is what the brain is there for providing, to make this organism safe and secure. So can the impulse or the desire to throw out this me, to get rid of the self, which is operating in some of us so strongly, transform into an interest to watch it, to see it, so that there is some wisdom about it, which means wisdom is antidote to falling into a trap. And the more it's seen in action, with its addictive powers, image eliciting, chemicals to feel high or low, and the narrowness of it, the crampedness, the spacelessness of it, the burden of it, and very often the pain of it, the conflict which this nurturing and promoting of one's image creates with others, the isolation it creates, the separation from others, because being with our image becomes more important than being with other people who are also images. We don't know each other when we're caught up in images, or when there is caught upness in imagery. When that's seen clearly at moments or periods of clarity, insight, awareness, it's exposed for what it is, and its importance diminishes, it crumbles. Like when the curtain was pulled on The Wizard of Oz. So with a crumbling importance of this VIPness that one may be so caught up in, has been so caught up in, with the crumbling importance, having seen how it comes into being, its effects, its isolation from others, pain, fearing for it, defending it, getting into defensive arguments with others, and more estrangement or alienation. Not even wanting to see people anymore, like we talked about yesterday or the day before, is all associated in the brain with hurt to me, my image. But light shed on all of that is a different thing altogether. Sometimes it evokes a good laugh, what it is that has been caught up in. Or or just a sigh of relief of discovering something that's true. And at the moment of this awareness or insight, there is no feeling of separation. Because insight has no programs, no projects, no enemies, no friends. It just sheds light on the fact that we're not separate entities. We all suffer from the same dis-ease, the same mechanisms, the same problems, the same addictions, the same blindness, the same ignorance. So with that, a new connectedness can emerge, which has compassion in it, intelligence. And maybe a change of the structure. Because listening and looking openly and discovering what thought layers there are, how they function, changes something in this organism. Perception changes. I'm not able to put that very eloquently or educatedly, not working together with brain specialists. But it seems as though in this open perception, this quietness up here, relative, I mean, thoughts going on, but they do not impede the open perception, and not everything is funneled right through the cortex to be interpreted and known. It's a different circuit, if one will call it this. I'm saying this because I've been asked questions about it. Not to hold out a goal. It happens on its own. It cannot be approached with desire. Well, it can, but that doesn't do anything. Desire has to be seen for what it is, without interpretation, just as it happens. So, does that thought come up now? Is that all I am, is a bunch of images and memories? How disappointing. Some people, it's relieving. It's disappointing if the image is held onto of what we are. But we are not images. We're not images. Can we question whether we're just images? And how we hold on to them? And how everything that falls short of it is felt as disappointing or upsetting? And can it be questioned whether we need to have image of ourselves in order to function productively, creatively, intimately with each other? That has to be experienced directly. One cannot theorize about it. It has to be put to the test. Because the theory says, wait, watch out, you're going to lose the best part of yourself. And if one goes by such assumptions, then one will live in that way. But if there is some exploring spirit left in one, which we all had so much as little children, to explore, to find out, smell, taste, touch, pull open drawers and look in and take everything out. Some of that may be left in all of us. Then we'll question our assumptions if we come upon them. Many of them are hidden. My husband, when he was diagnosed with cancer a few years ago, it was a tremendous shock, because a lot of anxiety coming up, fear of dying, dying painfully, fear of leaving, all of this stuff comes up. And then he said, you know what I realized? I had this unquestioned assumption that I would live forever. Today he's in remission. And I'm sure he thinks very little about that. Sometimes when the time goes by so fast, this year has hardly started, and it's already half over. I say to him, you know, we're not going to be around that much longer. It goes so fast. And then he'll say, don't talk about it. I think it's good to question our assumptions and to live with the uncertainty. But in a certain way, not making something, oh, I'm living so uncertain, I want certainty. But really not knowing. It opens up the body-mind to what's there now, this moment, in a very amazing way. The fewer images, the more the intimacy, the directness of contact. And to keep being aware of this image-making factory up here, which is never resolved once and for all. At least I haven't experienced that. I haven't seen it happen in anyone else. And it doesn't have to stop, because as we talked about earlier in this retreat, there is place for creative imagination. Particularly in our environment, ecology, architecture, how to build, art, music. But does it have to revolve around me as the VIP? Then the open field contracts to a solitary confinement. And that contraction is observable as it happens, or as it just happened. When awareness shows it up. Wow, we've talked for a long time. We will end here for today.